Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we'll be going through the potential contracts the Jaguars could sign with their pending free agents. So before we get into it, we're going to start by going over some of the things from our last video, because you'll see there's a lot of changes on here. This is not how the website looks right when you open it. So the first one on here, you'll see Blake Hance, and probably wonder, why is Blake Hance on here? Because you've never heard of him. But Blake Hance is our fill-in here for Calvin Ridley. Because Calvin Ridley is actually below the 51 cutoff on over the cap because of the suspension and not being reinstated to the NFL. So because we cannot get him to factor against the cap, we are re-signing Blake Hance as our fill-in and giving him the same contract value that we would have given to Calvin Ridley. Now, aside from that, just to kind of recap what we did last time real fast, we restructured a few players, looked at restructuring Christian Kirk, Foyesade Oluokun, and Darius Williams, because when you restructure a player, you convert your base salary, this number here, to signing bonus. You split that up across the years. That gives you more dead cap later on. And so, essentially why you do that is to save money now, push cap down the road, and you also have to do this with players that you trust to be around. So, for example, I wouldn't restructure a player like Folorunso Fatukasi, because I think this last year was disappointing, honestly. And not all his fault, but he just wasn't on the field a ton, and wasn't a huge name here. So, looking at that, these three players are players that we can rely on long term, and I think should be starters on this team, at least for the duration of their contracts. Otherwise than that, we cut Shaquille Griffin and Roy Robertson Harris, and then we extended two players. Oh, also traded Caleb on Chason, another thing to throw in there. But we extended Josh Allen, and we extended Jamal Agnew. And if you want to see why we extended Josh Allen, that's probably one of the, I guess, not really crazy moves, but the different from what you expect moves. If you want to see why we did that, you can watch the last video. But essentially, right now is going to be one of your cheapest points to extend him. And if you think he's going to be a good pass rusher long term, then I think you need to get the contract done now. That will be better for this team than waiting until the end of the season, seeing that he's done a really good job, and then paying him millions more each year. But difference of opinions there, right? Because some people are pretty down on him right now, and they have reason to be. So that's just where I stand on him. But those are all of our big moves. And so this takes us from about negative 33 million all the way to almost 23 million under the cap. So you save about $56 million or so with all these moves. And you push a lot of money to the next season. So works out pretty well for the team. You've got money to work on your pending free agents. Now, with that all said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump into all these players. But right before we do, I just want to note all the contracts we're going to sign on here. These have been formulated off screen because, quite frankly, if I did this live, it would take a lot of time to figure out what the numbers would be. There'd be a lot of silence. It just wouldn't be fun to watch. And so there's a lot of exact numbers in here, and there's a reason for them, but I'll kind of explain why they're all there. So we'll start at the top with Jawaan Taylor. And a few of these guys won't really talk about just because not really going to be a huge impact on the team. For example, like Adam Gotsis or maybe even Chris Manhertz. So Jawaan Taylor. Now, if the team wants to bring him back, I think this is one of those deals that you got to get done as a team-friendly deal. If you pay him what his market value is going to be, I think it's just going to be too much for this team. And the report right now is we're looking at about $15 million a year, which isn't absolutely crazy, but it's pretty high on the range that you want to pay him. And kind of where you expected him to land before all this is 13 to 17 million. Anywhere in there. And so you want to try to get that as close to your end as possible. I think that is possible for the Jaguars to do. So we'll look at some of the right tackle contracts, just to give you an idea. The highest paid right tackle in the league is Ryan Ramsey. Hopefully I said that right. Probably not, though. Where we're looking to have Jawaan Taylor on here is probably as that 7th highest paid tackle. And that's right tackles. So we're looking in this range, ideally. Now, a lot of people, when they think of Jawaan Taylor this last year, they think of a fantastic pass protector, right? He did a great job in that role. But another part to his game that we have to consider and has to factor into the contract is the fact that Jawaan Taylor did not do a fantastic job in the run blocking department. In fact, PFF had him graded with the most negatively graded run plays at the tackle position across the entire NFL that season. So it's obviously terrible stat to be a part of. And this is PFF grading it. PFF is off on things, and I think in general they're kind of low on where they have the Jaguars right now with the run blocking, because they're like 30th in the league. And I think they're bottom half for sure, but I don't think they're near dead last. So, I look at that and I have to factor that in, because what we need to look at on the offensive line is making sure that we still have a really good ceiling that we can reach for the run blocking on this team. Because I don't want to just have really good pass blockers that can't help with the run game. I don't think that's good for this team, because then you're going to make it one-dimensional, and you're going to, quite frankly, waste away the rookie contract for a fantastic running back in Travis Etienne. We already lost 1 year because of the Liz Frank injury, and last year it was pretty good, but I quite frankly think he could have done way better if the blocking was better. And here's what's interesting about Jawaan Taylor. Just want to show you something I looked up. So the NFL, you can actually find these on really any player. You can go back, you can look at the draft profile for all of these players when they came in the NFL. And then they predict roughly when they should be selected and kind of their role. You see that right here. And so Jawaan Taylor, one of the things we see in here right at the beginning, plus run blocker, nasty demeanor. When he came into the NFL, people didn't doubt that Jawaan Taylor could be a really good run blocker. And so where I stand on him, I think that Taylor can absolutely still be a good run blocker. I just don't think that right now he is necessarily good. I think he's a little below average. And I think he can be good. So, for me, when I look at this contract and whether or not it should be signed, it comes down to two things. One is, can you get him closer to your side of the bargain? Can you get him closer to the number you want rather than the number he wants? And the other question is, do you believe that Jawaan Taylor, at this point in his career, can improve at run blocking and be a plus player in that department? And for me, I think both of those questions, I think there's a shot that they're both yes. I think you can get him close to your end. I think he wants to stay in Jacksonville. And as a young player, I think he can be a better run blocker. So, the contract that we are going to sign with him, now that I've made you wait so long talking about all the information behind him, the contract we're going to sign with him, we're going to project that this is a team-friendly deal. And there's a chance it isn't. There's a chance they sign him for more. There's a chance he walks, right? But we're going to have him coming back to Jacksonville. So this deal is going to be worth $13.5 million a year over the course of 3 years. So the entire value of this contract is $40.5 million. We're going to have the signing bonus be $13.5 million. This is all money he gets paid immediately, but it's split up in cap hit over the 3 years. We're going to have the base salary be the veteran minimum the first year. That way the contract's backloaded. You see he's only paid against the cap south of $6 million. And the base cap, and this is what I talked about where it's just numbers I had to figure out off screen to get this correct. This will be your base salary, and that gets him to $40.5 million over the course of that contract. As far as guarantees, and I'll be honest, this might be written incorrectly, but the point of this is essentially he would have 2 years guaranteed on this team, and the third year there would be an out where he wouldn't be guaranteed that season, but obviously there's dead cap because of the signing bonus. So it'll be $4.5 million that year. So that's what our contract looks like. So you're going to have south of $6 million counting this year, and then south of $18 million the following 2 years. And you have an option to get out that final year, and you would save roughly $13 million. It looked very similar to Shaquille Griffin's deal at the end of it. So we'll transact that. Now we got Jawaan Taylor on the team. You see the cap space takes a big dent. That I believe is the biggest dent that it will take in all of this. So now Marvin Jones. So Marvin Jones, he had a pretty successful year, I would say. Not as great as what it was before, but he's still, at his age, he gets a lot of yardage. He plays well. He's not a perfect player. He goes away in games, of course, but when the team needed him to step up, he stepped up. He was a reliable player, and I think if Jacksonville can keep him around and he wants to come back to win a Super Bowl as a rotational player, then I think you bring him back. Now, if you don't, I think there's definitely replacements for him. You could simply just look at having Tim Jones come in once again and essentially swap out Marvin Jones for Calvin Ridley, which is already a win. Or you could look to draft someone. Great player that you'll want to read up on is Xavier Hutchinson. Fantastic fit for Jacksonville because it's a hometown guy. He has the gameplay that matches up to what Marvin Jones has done. He can play outside in the slot. Point is, essentially with all this, that there are options to replace Marvin Jones. And I think he's going to have a choice this offseason. And it's going to be, do you want to play in Jacksonville and try to win a Super Bowl as a rotational player, assuming there's no injury? Or do you want to go to another team, say a team like the Arizona Cardinals, that's rebuilding, that is very unlikely to be competing for a Super Bowl, and be one of the starting receivers and make more money? So that's the question he's going to have to answer. And I don't know what that answer will be. I think what would be best for him is obviously going somewhere he could start and making more money, because I think he can continue to start for a couple more years. But I could see him sticking around. He's very clearly, when you watch the games, been one of Trevor Lawrence's most trusted targets. He's a player who's stuck through his entire time in Jacksonville. And I just think he's a really nice fit with the team for the role you're looking at having him in. If you're putting him on the field in the red zone to go make contested catches, that's fantastic. If you have him as your backup receiver, that's fantastic. So if we're looking to bring him back, if he's a rotational player, I think you can get this deal done for $3 to $4 million. So just so you see what the cap would look like, we would go down to about $15 million here. Now, I am not going to count this against the cap, and this will be the one player we talk about in depth that I don't think returns. So we're going to go ahead and undo this. I'm going to expect Marvin Jones to want to start on another team. So that's what I've got on him. Now we're going to talk about Evan Engram, the other really big free agent the Jaguars have. So Evan Engram, story on him. Had a fantastic season, best season of his career arguably. Was dominant at the end of the year. He's a top 5 tight end on this team. And you can thank a lot of this to Doug Peterson as a tight end prodigy of a head coach. And at the same time, Trevor Lawrence being his quarterback. All things that made this possible. And if Evan Engram goes to another team, he's going to lose all of that. I don't think there's another team that can really compete with that as far as the head coach and the quarterback duo, other than obviously the Chiefs, and the Chiefs have Travis Kelce, if you didn't know. So Jacksonville has a huge advantage in the contract negotiations because Engram doesn't have the option to just go to another team and expect to have the same results. It's very unlikely. It's clear from his interviews, Engram wants to stay here. And we're already fully aware that a lot of these players, if they all want to stick around, are going to have to take team-friendly deals. And so, Ingram's, out of all these contracts, is the one that could have the most variance. Could really range pretty far. So you could see him go for the same value he did this last year. $9 million a year. I could also see him get a Mark Andrews contract. $14 million a year. He could go anywhere in that range. And what we're going to project is that his contract is going to be slightly closer to what the Jaguars want, rather than what Evan Engram would want to get paid. So it's going to be another 3-year deal. We're going to pay him from that 9 to 14 million range, $10.5 million a year. Now the signing bonus, we're going to have at $10.5 million. You combine that with his base salary, the first year, he will have $11.5 million in his pocket. So no issues as far as what he's being paid in his pocket this year and the future years. Now, with that, once again, we push this money down the road. And you see the cap hit this first year is less than $5 million. Now the base salary, these next year's, is going to be this, just south of $10 million. Reason why, once again, these are figured out off screen. And this all, if you do the math, will end up being, I believe, $31.5 million. And it's going to be the same as Jawaan Taylor's contract in the sense that we are going to have his first year fully guaranteed, second year fully guaranteed, and the third year is not guaranteed, but there's a dead cap hit of $3.5 million. So that's what we're looking at for his contract. And I could see it being a little more than this, especially if the team moves on from a player like Taylor and they have more money available. But this is kind of around the range I expect him to go for. Now, one thing you got to keep in mind too, as great as Evan Engram was, he's also not a complete tight end. He's not a tight end that's like Travis Kelce, where he can block. He can do all of these roles, and he can do them at a high level. He's a great receiver, but as a run blocker or pass blocker, if you watched him, you can see the effort. You see him trying, but he whiffs on plays. And yeah, I think this team is going to have to absolutely look at trying to bring in a second tight end to pair with him that has a better profile as a blocker. So he's not a perfect tight end. For that reason, I don't think you're paying him at the very top of the tight end range. And you can even see here, look at Travis Kelce's contract. He's the best tight end of all time. No conversation in my mind about that. And he's getting paid just north of $14 million a year. That's a team-friendly deal. And I think you could see something similar to Engram. So just an example. Now we're going to move on, because we've taken a lot of time, to a simpler one. Tre Herndon. So Herndon's very simple here. You're probably getting him back at the veteran minimum And if he wants a little more than that, I think you could pay him that. Because, quite frankly, for being a backup, he is a very good backup for this team. He played well in the slot. Not great, but good enough at the end of the year. It wasn't this huge hole that it was earlier in the season. And obviously that was more outside before until Darius Williams came into that role. But cornerback was not nearly as much of an issue when they switched things around. And we can actually see, we'll just take a look at it really quick. You look at the end of his season with the Jaguars. You see these grades? They go up right at the end. He was a lot better when the season wrapped up. Now this is middle of the season when he's kind of outside and then he's transitioning the slot. So you see it was not good at points of the year. But I think he's definitely a player you want to keep around. You're going to find a place for him on this roster. Tre Herndon's coming back to the Jaguars. And I think you get him for the veteran minimum. Now, Corey Peters. Corey Peters is going to be retiring. That's all the rumors. And like some of these other guys, he's just going to be someone who's not going to be a huge impact. So Dawuane Smoot we'll talk about. Now, Smoot, he was on track to have his best season as a pass rusher. And I think if he wasn't injured, you could be looking at paying him $7 or $8 million a year. However, he tore his Achilles. Had one of the worst injuries he could have to finish a year. And so you factor that with as well the fact that he might not be back by the beginning of the season. This is a player you might only have for half the year, and you don't know who he's going to be now. I think he will return to form, but that's not a guarantee. We've seen players not be able to come back. Now, thankfully, the surgery for repairing an Achilles tear has gotten better. We saw James Robinson, for example, come back on fire this season before the Jaguars and Jets unfortunately ruined his career. I hope I'm wrong, but something sad for sure. I just think because of all this, you're looking at a cheap deal for Dawuane Smoot on a 1-year contract. And if he proves, hey, I'm back, I'm just as good as I was, then you're paying him more, or another team's paying him more in 2024. So we're going to have him at $3 million. So leave it at that. Won't worry about writing in the guarantee on this one. However the team figures it out, they figure it out. But you're going to have him on your team. It's pretty much all guaranteed because it's a 1-year contract. He's not getting cut. Now Arden Key. This is, along with Evan Engram, a contract that could have a ton of variance. Because I've seen projections where they're saying, oh, he's going to go for $9 million a year. But I also look back at what he got paid by the Jaguars in the offseason. It was $4 million for one season. And technically his production did go down. Not that he was worse of a player, but I think this will be an argument the Jaguars make. Look at his sacks. He had less sacks this last year. Now, it's still production, and I think he's absolutely a valuable part of this team and a fantastic rotational pass rusher. But when you're negotiating contracts, you're going to use everything to your advantage you can without obviously souring the relationship. So I think Arden Key is going to fall between $4 and $9 million. And for the sake of this, we're going to put him at $6 million a year, 2 seasons, $12 million overall. We're going to have a signing bonus of $5 million because when you pair that with the base salary of the first year, he gets half his contract in his pocket the first year, and it saves the last half the second year. And that's our number for base salary. That gets us to $12 million over this time. And you see, it's backloaded, and we will guarantee the first year fully, and the second year will not necessarily be guaranteed. Because he's already getting paid his average the first year. So, transact that. I just think he's a smart player to bring back. If this team can keep both these pass rushers, that's really good for them because those players as rotational guys are really in their most impactful role for a team. If there are other players on the field who are bigger threats, because that's going to provide Smoot and Key a better chance when they're on the field, because they're not always going to be going up against the best offensive linemen, the best offensive players, but that's going to be Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, right? Whereas if they're going to another team to start, then they might be the focus of that offensive line. So I think this is a good role for them. Now, we've only got a couple more on here. Adam Gotsis and Chris Manhertz, we're just going to skip over because for both of them, maybe they come back, but I don't think they're getting really anything over the veteran minimum. Andrew Wingard will be the next one we talk about. And this will be the last one we have at a specific price that is not the veteran minimum. So, Andrew Wingard, let's look at his last contract, just to give you an idea. So that's original contract. Should show something on here. Okay. So, I believe because he was undrafted, the way that works, you have 3 seasons that you're on a rookie deal, and then after that, you're able to sign anywhere for any amounts. Like, for example, James Robinson just finished his 3rd year. He is a free agent right now. So, theoretically, the Jaguars could pursue him. I don't think they will after trading him, but yeah. That's the case with Andrew Wingard. And so he signed a 1-year deal worth about $2.5 million. And as far as a player, man, he's about the exact same he was. He's still a leader. He's just still a great guy for the locker room. Obviously, with the team doing better, that's all amplified to be bigger. But he's a fantastic backup safety. You love him in that role. And as much as you may want to say backups won't matter, he came out on the field here and there. He had to. There were games where Andre Sisco was out. I'm sure there were games where Jenkins was out as well. And so, Andrew Wingard's a player you want to bring back. And plus, as I've said before on here, he made up the slogan, "It was always the Jags." What's it going to look like if he leaves the team after that? I just can't imagine it, right? And so, what we're going to do is we're going to pay him $5 million over 2 years. So it's about the same value, $2.5 million. The signing bonus is $1.5 million, so he gets half this contract in his pocket right off the bat. And then your guaranteed salary is that, and then his signing bonus. So the team will have the option to cut him the 2nd year if they want. So that's the deal we got lined out for Andrew Wingard. Now on the rest of this list, the only players I would for sure try to bring back, and one of these, I think you could argue, might still be replaced. JaMycal Hasty and Riley Patterson. I think JaMycal Hasty is the one that could end up not coming back just if they go after multiple running backs or they say, hey, we want to keep around Snoop Connor. I don't think that will happen. But I could see them going after multiple running backs. That's definitely on the table. Because I think behind ETN, it's very much open what could happen, but I like Hasty. I still think he should be here, but it is possible he's not. I think what he brings to your team, obviously, he played pretty well when he had to start. He was not this insane downgrade that completely took the running game out of game plans. He was still able to be utilized. We saw him play as a receiver okay, so you know he can receive the ball from the backfield. And he also, surprisingly, was a pretty solid pass blocker. And the receiving ability and the pass blocking ability are the two things that ETN has not really taken advantage of or shown to this point. Or shown, that is. Because I think ETN can be a good receiver. But as a pass blocker, He's not been good at that. So we're going to bring back Hasty. This is the minimum he would be offered. I think you can get him on that, especially considering that he was a guy who was claimed for the team. I don't think anyone's going to offer him necessarily over that value. And Riley Patterson, he's still a rookie. This is what you would offer to keep him for his second year, and you could get him on that. So let's evaluate where we're at, and then we're going to also make some cuts to get this roster down to size. So we've got just south of $8 million available in cap space. We are also over in cap space next year. Now this right here, even with Calvin Ridley still being your big free agent, it's fine. Because you can still push money down the road, and you're going to have players you can cut. You're going to have actually, I think arguably 5 big ones you could consider. Those being Cam Robinson, Brandon Scherf, Fatukasi, Jones, and Jenkins. And I think one of those guys will probably end up being cut by that point, probably more, just because these players aren't always going to work out every single season. So, hopefully not, but that's the realistic thought process behind that. Now, what we're going to cut down this roster to, we're going to cut it down to 42 players. And the reason why is because we want to set it at 42 because 51 count against the cap. And there are 9 draft picks. If we have 42 here and we add on the 9, we have to save obviously $10 million for the draft class. That's the pool they need to sign all of those players. Then you hit 51 players and you're under the cap. So we're going to go ahead and count these. We've got 8 guys we re-signed. Blake Hance is our Calvin Ridley. He was already signed technically, just needs to be reinstated. So it's going to come through here and count. Take me a moment. Okay, so everyone south of here. And we'll actually just look back through this in a moment, because some of these guys won't get cut. So, like Nathan Rourke, I actually don't think he gets cut based on the deal he signed. You see there's a bit of a cap hit there if you cut him. So we'll take him off. I think he might actually be the backup. Monteric Brown probably won't be cut. And then it might keep... I don't know. Let's say Gregory Jr., because he was drafted recently. And we will cut Jimmy Murray, Quadri Olson, and then we will cut Jeremiah Ledbetter. So we're at 42. And you see before we sign free agents outside of the building, there's just north of $5 million available for free agent signings. So the salary cap impact for every player we sign, it is essentially what they are paid their first year minus the value of the player you cut. So for example, let's say we signed a player that had his first year value, not the average value of his contract per year, but the first year value, which we see up here is lower than the average the players are being paid. Let's say it's $2.5 million. And then we cut, let's say, Daniel Thomas or Chris Claybrooks. So it's $2.5 million minus $1 million. So $1.5 million is what you would lose in cap space. So you're able to make probably 2 or 3 moves in free agency, or you're able to go after one big player. You would have the money available for that. So with that said, we're going to leave that all to the next video. In the next video for you guys, just so you know what we're doing in that, we're going to sign some free agents to this team. Going to look at players they could realistically bring in. We've already talked about that as well, so you'll probably see some names off there. Maybe some new ones. I'll look into it, see if there's anyone else who makes sense. And once we do that, we'll do a draft. We'll go through, try to hit the rest of the needs, but ideally, we're looking at bringing in the best players. And once that's all done, We'll evaluate how much salary cap is available, look at what the future would look like real quick, and then look at the depth chart for this next season and see where's the team better, where's it worse. Hint, the team will be better than it was this last year. And you can expect that in real life because there is a way to navigate this situation to where this team is better and they can go a lot farther in the playoffs. Hopefully to go win a Super Bowl. We all hope for that. So, with that said, I appreciate you watching this. And if you've got any ideas for anything you want to see on this channel, let me know. Absolutely open to it. At some point, we're going to have to start thinking of other ideas because, quite frankly, the list of things I've got to talk about is not a super long list. And we'll have some news as the off season goes on, for sure. But if you feel like there's something lacking in this community that you want to see from anyone really covering the team, just the fans covering the team, that is, because that's what I am, just let me know, and we'll try to get it out there. So, with that said, thank you for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and go Jags.